Hello, everyone. I'm Natasha.
If you're new here, I am truly delighted that you decided to join us. On this channel, we publish a new English learning video every single day to help you improve your English step by step and move closer to genuine fluency. In today's episode, you are going to train several powerful skills at the same time: your English listening, your understanding of fast, natural English conversations, and your ability to respond like a confident speaker. This lesson is designed to help you gradually move from basic English towards C1 and C2 level understanding, where conversations feel natural, quick, and effortless. Today, we're going to explore something extremely important for advanced fluency: understanding fast English conversations in daily life. Many learners study grammar and vocabulary for years, but when they hear native speakers talking quickly in real situations, they suddenly feel lost. The words seem to connect together, sentences move quickly, and it becomes difficult to follow the conversation. In this lesson, we will train your ears and your mind so that fast English becomes clearer and easier to understand. Throughout this video, I will guide you through many realistic daily life conversations, situations you may experience at work, while traveling, when meeting friends, during phone calls, or even in simple everyday moments like ordering coffee or asking for directions. These examples will help you recognize how natural English really sounds when people speak quickly and naturally. You will also practice thinking and responding in English like a native speaker. Instead of translating in your mind, you will learn to understand meaning instantly and react naturally in conversation. This is one of the key differences between intermediate learners and truly fluent speakers. As we go through the lesson, I will also give you short practice exercises. Sometimes I will ask you to listen carefully to a sentence. Sometimes I will ask you to repeat after me, and sometimes you will imagine yourself inside the conversation and respond naturally. These small practice moments are very powerful. They help train your brain to process English faster and more confidently. By the end of this video, you will feel much more comfortable understanding natural English conversations. You will notice how native speakers connect words, shorten expressions, and use everyday phrases that textbooks often don't teach. Little by little, your listening speed will improve, your reactions will become faster, and your English will start to feel more natural. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you never miss our daily English learning lessons. Every video on this channel is designed to help you become a stronger and more confident English speaker. Now take a deep breath, relax your mind, and if you like, keep a pen and paper nearby so you can write down useful phrases that you hear during the lesson. All right, let's begin practicing together. Let us start today's session with a concept that is crucial for advanced English fluency: understanding the actual rhythm and sound of fast English conversations in daily life. Many learners mistakenly believe that they need a larger vocabulary or more grammar rules to reach a higher level. However, in reality, one of the biggest obstacles at the C1 and C2 level is simply keeping up with the speed and flow of natural, connected speech. Native speakers constantly use connected speech, where words are linked together, sounds are dropped, and sentences are spoken with natural emotion. This can make real-life sentences sound completely different from the formal English you read in textbooks. When you train your ears to identify these natural patterns, something amazing happens. Suddenly, conversations begin to make sense, and your brain starts to understand the meaning almost instantly. Instead of translating word for word, imagine yourself walking into a busy coffee shop in the morning before work. The atmosphere is loud. People are ordering drinks. Someone is chatting with the barista, and two friends are talking at a nearby table. When native speakers talk in situations like this, their conversation moves quickly but naturally. Imagine this example. One person says, "Hey, good morning. I didn't expect to run into you here so early." The other person responds casually, "Yeah, I had an early meeting downtown, so I figured I'd grab a coffee first." Notice how natural that exchange feels. The sentences are not complicated, but the speed and rhythm can be a challenge for learners who are not used to hearing authentic, spoken English. Now, imagine that you are a part of that conversation. Someone looks at you and says, "Good morning. I didn't expect to see you here so early." Instead of pausing for a long time to translate, a fluent speaker responds smoothly and quickly. For instance, you might say, "Yeah, I had to start work early today, so I thought I'd stop by for a coffee before heading to the office." Listen carefully and repeat that sentence slowly in your mind. I had to start work early today, so I thought I'd stop by for a coffee before heading to the office. Practicing sentences like this helps train your brain to create natural responses without hesitation. Let us imagine another scenario in that same coffee shop. A coworker walks in and joins the conversation. One person says, "Hey, we were just talking about the new project at the office. Have you heard any updates about it yet?" The second person responds, "Not really. I heard they are planning to launch it next month, but I am not sure if that timeline will stick." This kind of interaction is extremely common in daily life. People exchange small pieces of information, express uncertainty, and respond quickly without overthinking grammar rules. The goal for you as a learner is to feel comfortable understanding and responding to these types of exchanges. Now, let us turn that moment into a quick speaking practice. Imagine someone asks you this question: "Have you heard any news about the new project yet?" Think about how you might respond naturally. One good answer could be, "Not much yet. I have heard a few people mention it, but I don't know the exact details." Echo this alternative response. "Yeah, I heard a little bit about it yesterday, but I am still waiting to see how everything plays out." Notice how both responses sound natural and relaxed. When you practice speaking like this, you begin to build the rhythm of authentic English conversation. One crucial skill at the C1 and C2 level is mastering how native speakers soften their statements. Instead of using very direct or rigid sentences, fluent speakers frequently use small expressions that make their speech sound more natural. For instance, someone might say, "I guess we'll just have to wait and see," or "It looks like things might change soon," or "From what I've noticed, they are still figuring out the details." These expressions allow speakers to share their thoughts without sounding too absolute or demanding. Practicing these kinds of phrases will help your English sound much more sophisticated and natural. Let us imagine another daily life situation. You are talking with a colleague during a short break at work. Your colleague says, "You look a little tired today. Did you stay up late last night?" You respond casually, "Yeah, I ended up doing some work at home, and before I knew it, it was past midnight." Notice the phrase, "before I knew it," in that sentence. This expression is everywhere in spoken English. It simply means that time passed quickly without you realizing it. Now imagine the conversation continuing. Your colleague says, "That happens to me all the time. I start watching a short video online, and suddenly 2 hours are gone." You might respond with something like, "Exactly. That is the dangerous part about the internet. You think you will only spend a few minutes, but then time just disappears." This type of back and forth dialogue is a perfect example of natural English rhythm. Short statements, quick reactions, and shared experiences make conversations smooth and friendly. Let us turn this into another speaking exercise. Imagine someone says, "I started watching one short video and suddenly 2 hours passed." How would you respond? Listen and repeat. "Yeah, that happens to me way more often than I'd like to admit." Or you could say, "I know exactly what you mean. It is way too easy to lose track of time online." Practicing multiple responses helps your brain become flexible when speaking English. Now, let us explore another daily situation where fast English frequently happens: informal conversations between friends. Imagine two friends meeting after not seeing each other for a while. One friend says, "Wow, it has been forever since we last caught up. How have you been?" The other friend responds warmly, "I have been doing pretty well, actually. Work has been crazy, but overall, things are going great." Notice the phrase, "it has been forever." This expression simply means a long time, and it is incredibly common in casual conversations. The dialogue continues naturally. One friend asks, "So, what have you been working on lately?" The other responds, "Mostly the same projects as before. But recently, I have been trying to learn a few new skills on the side." This type of sentence demonstrates how fluent speakers add extra information naturally when speaking. They do not stop after one short answer. Instead, they expand their thoughts slightly to keep the conversation flowing. Now, it is your turn to imagine being in that conversation. Someone asks you, "What have you been working on lately?" Think about your response. You might say, "I have been focusing on improving my English and practicing every day." Or you could say, "I have been super busy with work recently, but I am also trying to learn new things whenever I have free time." These responses are simple but natural, and they help keep a fluid conversation going. Another useful skill for advanced English speakers is expressing subtle emotions during a conversation. Native speakers frequently show interest, surprise, or agreement through short reactions. For instance, someone might say, "That sounds really interesting," or "That makes sense," or "I totally get what you mean." These small reactions are incredibly important because they make conversations feel like a two-way street instead of a one-sided lecture. Imagine a dialogue where someone tells you a story about a recent experience. They say, "Last weekend, I tried cooking a new recipe and, surprisingly, it turned out great." You might respond with enthusiasm by saying, "Oh, awesome! That must have felt really rewarding." The speaker might continue, "Yeah, I wasn't expecting it to work out that well, but now I am thinking about trying a few more recipes." You could then reply, "That is a great idea. Once you start cooking regularly, it gets a lot more fun." Let us practice responding again. Imagine someone says to you, "I tried a new recipe and it turned out amazing." Your turn to respond. "That is awesome. What did you make?" Another great response could be, "That's great. I always feel proud when a recipe actually works out." These small conversational responses are essential for sounding natural at the highest levels of English fluency. Conversations frequently speed up quickly because people link ideas together. For instance, someone might say, "I was planning to go to the gym this morning, but I ended up sleeping through my alarm." The phrase "ended up" is extraordinarily common in spoken English. It shows how a situation finished differently than you originally planned. Understanding phrases like this helps you follow fast conversations much more easily. Imagine responding to that sentence. Someone says, "I was planning to go to the gym, but I ended up sleeping through my alarm." You might reply, "Honestly, I have done that more times than I can count." Or you might say, "Sometimes your body just needs the extra rest." Both responses sound relaxed and natural. Now, let us practice listening for meaning. Instead of focusing on every single individual word, imagine someone speaking quickly and saying, "I thought about calling you yesterday, but things got a little crazy at work." Even if you miss one word, you can still understand the overall meaning. The speaker wanted to call, but work got busy. Training your brain to catch the overall message is one of the most crucial listening skills for advanced English learners. Let us expand that moment into a short dialogue. One person says, "I thought about calling you yesterday, but things got a little crazy at work." The other person responds, "No worries at all. I figured you were probably busy." The first speaker then adds, "Yeah, it was one of those days where everything seemed to happen at once." This phrase, "one of those days," is very common in natural English. It describes a day when many unexpected or stressful things happen. Imagine how you might respond. If someone said that to you, you could say, "I know exactly what you mean. Some days just feel overwhelming." Echo this alternative. "Yeah, those kinds of days happen to everyone." These supportive responses help conversations feel friendly and natural. Another significant element of advanced dialogue is storytelling. Fluent speakers frequently share short stories about their daily experiences. For instance, someone might say, "You won't believe what happened to me this morning. I was rushing to catch the bus, and right as I got to the stop, the bus pulled away." A listener might respond with sympathy, saying, "Oh no, that is the worst feeling." The speaker might continue, "Yeah, but luckily another bus came about 10 minutes later." Let us practice responding to that story. Imagine someone tells you, "I missed the bus this morning." A natural response could be, "That is so frustrating. Hopefully, the next one came quickly." Another response might be, "I hate when that happens. It always feels like the bus leaves at the exact moment you get there." These types of conversational exchanges condition your brain to react quickly and naturally over time. Your responses become faster, your listening improves, and interacting feels much more comfortable. One more fast scenario before we move further. Imagine you are talking with a friend about weekend plans. Your friend asks, "Do you have anything fun planned for the weekend?" You might answer, "Nothing too exciting, but I am planning on relaxing and catching up on a few things." Your friend might reply, "Actually, that sounds really nice. Sometimes a quiet weekend is exactly what you need." This kind of simple interaction happens everywhere in daily life, and mastering it is a huge step toward advanced fluency. Now, pause for a moment and imagine someone asking you the exact same question. "Do you have anything planned for the weekend?" Try answering aloud right now. You might say, "I am planning to spend some time practicing English and maybe watching a movie." Or you might say, "I don't have any big plans yet, but I will probably just relax and see what happens." Practicing answers like this helps your speaking become more natural and confident. As we move through this lesson, you will notice something interesting. The conversations themselves are not overly complicated. What makes them challenging is the speed, the rhythm, and the natural expressions that native speakers use. Once you start identifying these patterns, your comprehension improves rapidly. Now we will explore more daily life conversations where people speak quickly, share their thoughts, and react naturally to one another. You will continue practicing how to understand the flow of fast English and how to respond smoothly in authentic situations. Let us continue building your ability to understand fast English by stepping into another very common daily life situation: running into someone unexpectedly during a busy day. Imagine you are walking down the street when you suddenly see a friend you haven't talked to in a while. Your friend smiles and says, "Hey, I didn't know you were in this area today." You respond naturally. "Yeah, I had a few errands to run nearby, so I figured I would stop by this neighborhood for a bit." Conversations like this usually start casually, and fluent speakers instantly adjust their tone to match the situation. Your friend might continue by asking, "So, how have things been going lately?" This question is incredibly common in everyday English. It is not asking for one specific detail. Instead, it invites a brief update about your life. A natural response might be, "Things have been going pretty well overall. I have been busy with work, but I am also trying to spend time improving my English." When you respond with a little extra information, it keeps the conversation flowing smoothly. Now, imagine the conversation continues. Your friend nods and says, "That sounds great. Staying busy can actually be a good thing sometimes." You might agree by saying, "Yeah, I guess so too." When you stay active and keep learning new things, time feels more meaningful. Notice how the interaction remains simple but expressive. Fluent speakers frequently share subtle thoughts like this. Instead of giving short answers that kill the conversation, let us turn this moment into a quick speaking practice. Imagine someone asks you, "How have things been going lately?" Think of a natural answer. You might say, "They have been going pretty well. I have been focusing on improving my skills and learning new things." Echo this response. "Honestly, things have been a little crazy recently, but overall, I can't complain." Practicing responses like these helps you react faster when conversations happen in real life. Now, let us move into another realistic situation: a conversation between coworkers during a short break. One person says, "I feel like this week has flown by incredibly fast." The other person responds, "I know exactly what you mean. It feels like Monday was just yesterday." This kind of commentary is very common in daily dialogue because people frequently talk about how fast time passes during busy days. Imagine you join this conversation. Someone says, "This week flew by really fast." You might respond with something like, "Yeah, time seems to speed up when you are busy." Or you might say, "That is so true. Sometimes I don't even realize how fast the days are passing." These responses show agreement and keep the conversation moving naturally. Let us continue the scene. One coworker says, "Do you have anything planned after work today?" The other person replies, "Not really. I am thinking about relaxing at home and maybe watching a movie." Notice how the phrase "not really" softens the answer. Instead of simply saying no, speakers frequently use expressions like "not really," "not right now," or "nothing special" to sound more natural. Now, imagine someone asks you the exact same question. "Do you have anything planned after work today?" think about your response. You might say, "Nothing special. I will probably relax for a bit and catch up on a few things." Another great answer could be, "I might go for a walk later, but I haven't decided yet." Both responses sound casual and natural in everyday dialogue. Now, let us focus on something crucial for understanding fast English: connected speech. When native speakers talk quickly, they frequently connect words together so that the sentence sounds smoother. For instance, the phrase, "What are you doing later?" might sound more like, "What you doing later?" in very fast, casual speech. This does not mean the grammar changes. It simply means the pronunciation becomes more relaxed and connected. Imagine a friend asking you quickly, "What you doing later?" The meaning is still clear, even though the words are shortened. A natural response could be, "I am not sure yet. I might meet up with a friend or just stay home and relax." Practicing these types of sentences helps your ear adjust to the rhythm of real conversations. Now, let us explore another everyday moment: discussing plans for the weekend. A friend says, "I have been looking forward to the weekend all week." The other person laughs and replies, "Same here. I think everyone feels that way by Friday afternoon." These subtle, shared experiences make conversations feel friendly and natural. Imagine your friend continues speaking. They say, "Do you usually plan your weekends in advance? Or do you just figure things out at the last minute?" That is a thoughtful question that invites a longer answer. You might respond by saying, "Most of the time, I just figure things out as they come. I prefer keeping my weekends flexible." Another natural answer could be, "Sometimes I plan a few things in advance, but I also like leaving room for spontaneous plans." Let us practice this together. Imagine someone asks you, "Do you plan your weekends in advance?" Try answering aloud. You might say, "Sometimes I do, but usually I just wait and see how I feel when the weekend gets here." Or you might say, "Yeah, I like planning a little bit so I don't waste the whole weekend doing nothing." Speaking these sentences helps your brain become more comfortable with spontaneous responses. Now, let us explore a situation that happens frequently when people are talking about daily routines. One person says, "I have been trying to wake up earlier in the mornings lately." The other person responds, "That is a great habit to build. Early mornings can be really productive." Notice how the conversation includes encouragement. Fluent speakers frequently support each other's goals during casual chats. Imagine you join this conversation. Someone tells you they are trying to wake up earlier. You might respond with interest by saying, "That is awesome. Have you noticed any difference in your daily routine?" The speaker might reply, "Actually, yes. I feel like I have more time to focus before the day gets crazy." You could then respond, "That makes sense. Starting the day calmly can really help your productivity." Let us practice another quick response. Imagine someone says, "I am trying to wake up earlier these days." You might respond, "That is a really good habit to develop." Another response could be, "I have thought about doing that too, but it is not always easy." These types of responses help conversations feel balanced and engaging. Now let us look at another natural conversation pattern: expressing subtle surprise. Imagine someone tells you, "I started reading a new book yesterday, and I ended up finishing half of it in one evening." You might respond with surprise by saying, "Wow, it must be a really interesting book." The speaker might reply, "Yeah, The story is so engaging that it is hard to stop reading. Let us turn this into a listening practice moment. Imagine someone speaking quickly and saying, "I started reading this book last night, and before I knew it, I had read half the thing." Even though the sentence moves fast, the meaning is still clear. The speaker started reading and unexpectedly kept going for a long time. Now imagine you respond to that story. You might say, "That is always a sign of a good book." Or you might say, "I love it when a story pulls you in like that." Both responses show interest and keep the conversation going. Now, let us practice reacting to opinions. Imagine someone says, "I think learning languages gets easier when you practice every single day." You might agree by saying, "I completely agree. Consistency makes a huge difference." Another response could be, "That is true. Even a little daily practice can lead to massive improvements over time." Now imagine someone expresses a slightly different perspective. They say, "Sometimes I feel like studying too much at once can actually become overwhelming." You might respond thoughtfully by saying, "That is a good point. Balance is definitely important when learning something new." Conversations like this allow people to exchange ideas naturally. Now, let us imagine another fast daily scenario. Waiting for public transportation. Two people are standing at a bus stop. One person says, "It looks like the bus might be running a little late today." The other person responds, "Yeah, I noticed that too. Hopefully, it gets here soon." These kinds of interactions frequently happen between strangers because people are sharing the same situation. Imagine you are part of that moment. Someone says, "Looks like the bus is running late." You might respond with something simple like, "Yeah, hopefully we won't be waiting too long." Or you might say, "I guess we will just have to be patient." These responses are natural and polite. Let us practice one more listening moment. Imagine someone speaking quickly and saying, "I guess we will just have to wait and see." This phrase is extremely common in English. It means the situation is uncertain, so the best option is to be patient and see what happens. Now imagine responding to that phrase. Someone says, "I guess we will just have to wait and see." You might agree by saying, "Yeah, sometimes that is all we can do." Another response could be, "True, some things are just out of our control." These subtle interactions may seem simple, but they are exactly the kind of conversations that build advanced listening and speaking skills. When you practice them regularly, your brain becomes faster at identifying patterns, understanding meaning, and responding naturally. As we move further into this lesson, we will explore even more situations where people speak quickly, share their perspectives, tell short stories, and react naturally in a conversation. Each example will help you become more comfortable with authentic spoken English and move closer to C1 and C2 level comprehension. Let us continue strengthening your ability to understand fast English conversations by imagining another very natural moment in daily life, a casual chat that starts while two people are walking together after work. One person says, "You know, today actually ended up better than I expected." The other person replies with curiosity, "Oh, really? What happened?" The first speaker continues, "Well, this morning started off a little stressful, but by the afternoon, everything finally started falling into place." This kind of expression is very common in English when someone says that things fell into place. They mean that problems were resolved and everything started working smoothly. Now imagine you are a part of that conversation. Someone tells you that their day ended better than expected. You might respond by saying, "That is always a nice surprise." Sometimes a day can start badly, but finish really well. Another natural response might be, "I am glad to hear that. It is always a relief when things work out in the end." These types of reactions make conversations feel supportive and positive. Let us expand the conversation further. The speaker might say, "At first, I thought the whole day was going to be a disaster, but somehow everything got better." The listener responds, "It is funny how that happens. Sometimes a small change can completely turn the day around." These kinds of reflections are very common in everyday discussions because people love talking about how their day went. Now, imagine someone tells you, "I thought today was going to be terrible, but it actually got better." Think about how you might respond. One natural answer could be, "That is awesome. It is always great when things take a positive turn." Another response could be, "Yeah, sometimes we worry way too much before things even happen." Practicing responses like this helps you develop conversational confidence. Now, let us transition into another common situation, discussing learning new skills. Imagine two friends talking about personal growth. One person says, "Lately, I have been trying to improve my communication skills." The other person replies, "That is a great goal. Good communication can open up so many opportunities." The first speaker continues, "Exactly. I realized that expressing ideas clearly is just as important as having good ideas." Now imagine joining that discussion. Someone tells you they are working on their communication skills. You might respond by saying, "That is really important, especially when you want to connect with people." Another response could be, "I totally agree. Being able to express yourself clearly makes a huge difference." Now, let us turn this moment into a quick speaking exercise. Imagine someone asks you, "What skill are you trying to improve these days?" Think about your response. You might say, "Right now, I am focusing on improving my English speaking and listening skills." Echo this alternative. "I am trying to get better at managing my time and staying organized." These answers sound natural because they provide a little explanation instead of just a one-word answer. Let us explore another type of conversation that happens all the time, discussing plans and possibilities. Imagine someone says, "I have been thinking about starting a new hobby, but I am not sure what to pick yet." The other person responds, "That sounds fun. Have you thought about trying something creative like photography or painting?" The first speaker replies, "I actually did think about photography. It seems like a fun way to capture everyday moments." Now, imagine you are part of that interaction. Someone says they want to start a new hobby. You might respond with curiosity by saying, "That sounds like a great idea. What kind of hobbies are you interested in?" Another response might be, "Trying something new can be really refreshing." Conversations like this allow people to bounce ideas off each other naturally. Let us keep visualizing the discussion. One person says, "I think hobbies are important because they give you a break from daily responsibilities." The other person agrees and replies, "That is true. They help you relax and also keep your mind active." Notice how both speakers expand their thoughts instead of giving very short answers. This habit makes conversations richer and more engaging. Now, let us practice responding again. Imagine someone says, "Hobbies are important because they help people relax." You might respond by saying, "I agree. Everyone needs some time to recharge. Another response could be, yes, and hobbies can also help people discover new talents. Practicing different responses makes your speaking more flexible. Now, let us explore a slightly different situation. A conversation about travel experiences. Imagine someone says, I recently visited a city I had never been to before, and it was a fascinating experience. The listener responds with interest. That sounds exciting. What did you enjoy the most about the trip? The speaker replies, honestly, I enjoyed just walking around the streets and exploring the local culture. Imagine you are listening to that story. You might respond by saying, exploring new places can be really inspiring. Another response could be, traveling frequently gives you a completely new perspective. These types of responses show interest and keep the conversation flowing. Let us turn this into a practice moment. Imagine someone asks you, do you enjoy traveling? Think about how you might answer. You could say, yes, I love traveling because it allows me to experience different cultures. Another good answer could be, I enjoy traveling when I have the chance because it helps me learn new things. These responses sound natural and thoughtful. Now, let us focus on something that shows up constantly in fast English conversations, expressing subtle doubts or uncertainties. For instance, someone might say, I am not entirely sure yet, but I think the meeting might be postponed. The phrase, I am not entirely sure, helps soften the statement. It shows that the speaker is not 100% certain about the information. Imagine someone tells you, I think the meeting might be postponed. You might respond by saying, that is possible. Sometimes schedules change unexpectedly. Another response could be, thanks for letting me know. I will keep an eye out for updates. These responses sound polite and natural. Now, let us imagine another everyday scenario, discussing technology and daily habits. One person says, I have been trying to cut down on the amount of time I spend on my phone. The other person replies, that is a challenge for a lot of people these days. The first speaker continues, yeah, I realized that I was checking my phone way too often without even thinking about it. Now, imagine you are a part of this discussion. Someone says they are trying to use their phone less. You might respond by saying, I have noticed the exact same habit in myself sometimes. Another response could be, it is not easy, but becoming more aware of it is a great first step. These responses sound reflective and thoughtful. Let us continue the conversation. One person says, I have started leaving my phone in another room while I work. The other person responds, that is actually a really smart strategy. The first speaker adds, it helps me focus so much better. This kind of conversation shows how people share practical tips during everyday discussions. Now, imagine someone tells you about that strategy. You might respond with interest by saying, that sounds like something I should try as well. Another response could be, it is amazing how small changes can improve your focus. Now, let us practice understanding fast storytelling. Imagine someone speaking quickly and saying, yesterday, I went out for a quick walk, and somehow I ended up talking with a neighbor for almost an hour. Even though the sentence is long, the meaning is simple. The speaker planned a short walk, but unexpectedly spent a long time chatting. Imagine how you might respond. You could say, "That must have been a nice conversation." Another response could be, "It is always fun when a quick moment turns into a long chat." Now, let us explore a deeper conversation pattern that shows up at higher levels of English, reflecting on experiences. Imagine someone says, "The more I learn new things, the more I realize how much there is still to learn." The listener responds thoughtfully, "That is actually a very wise perspective." The speaker continues, "Learning never truly ends, and that is what makes life interesting." Imagine you are listening to that reflection. You might respond by saying, "I completely agree. Continuous learning keeps the mind active." Another response could be, "That is one of the reasons I love studying languages." These responses show deeper engagement with the topic. Now, let us practice reacting to thoughtful ideas. Imagine someone says, "Learning never truly ends." Your response might be, "That is true. Every new experience teaches us something." Another response could be, "I think that is what makes personal growth so exciting." As you keep practicing these conversations, your listening and speaking skills start to strengthen together. You begin recognizing patterns, understanding expressions, and responding naturally without needing to translate every word in your head. Now, we will continue exploring more fast English conversations that include storytelling, opinions, and spontaneous reactions. Each example will help you become more comfortable understanding natural English and responding with confidence in authentic daily life situations. Let us continue building your ability to understand fast English conversations by jumping into another very common daily life situation, discussing everyday experiences that happen unexpectedly. Imagine two friends talking after a long day. One of them says, "You know what happened to me earlier today? I ran into an old friend completely by accident." The other person responds with surprise. "Really? That must have been unexpected." The speaker continues, "Yeah, I hadn't seen him in years, and suddenly we were standing in the exact same grocery store line." Situations like this pop up constantly in natural dialogue because people love sharing little surprising moments from their day. Now, imagine you are listening to that story. A natural response could be, "That is amazing. It is funny how small the world can feel sometimes." Another good response could be, "Moments like that make ordinary days more interesting." Notice how both responses show engagement with the story. Instead of ending the conversation quickly, let us imagine the chat continues. The speaker says, "We ended up talking for almost 20 minutes right there in the store." The listener laughs and replies, "That must have surprised the people waiting behind you." The speaker answers, "Probably, but nobody seemed to mind." These kinds of playful exchanges help conversations feel relaxed and friendly. Now, let us turn this moment into a speaking practice exercise. Imagine someone tells you, "I ran into an old friend today after so many years." Think about your response. You might say, "That must have been a really nice surprise." Another response could be, "I always love those unexpected reunions." Practicing responses like this helps your brain react naturally during real conversations. Now, let us explore another everyday topic, discussing habits and personal routines. Imagine someone says, "Lately, I have been trying to build better daily habits." The other person replies, "That sounds like a positive change. What kind of habits are you working on?" The first speaker answers, "I am trying to wake up earlier and start the day more calmly instead of rushing." Imagine you join this conversation. Someone says they are trying to build better habits. You might respond with encouragement by saying, "That is a great idea. A calm morning can really set the tone for the entire day." Another response could be, "It is amazing how small habits can lead to massive improvements over time." These types of supportive comments are very common in friendly discussions. Let us expand the conversation further. One person says, "The hardest part is staying consistent." The other person replies, "That is true. Motivation comes and goes, but consistency is what really makes the difference." Notice how the conversation now becomes slightly deeper. Instead of just describing events, the speakers are discussing ideas. Now, imagine someone says to you, "Staying consistent is the hardest part." Think about your response. You might say, "I completely agree. Discipline is often more important than motivation." Another response could be, "Yeah, but once something becomes a habit, it gets a lot easier." These kinds of statements help you express thoughtful opinions in English. Now, let us transition into another common conversation topic, discussing the weather and daily experiences. Imagine someone says, "The weather today feels completely different from yesterday." The other person replies, "I know, right? Yesterday was warm and sunny, and today it feels much cooler." Conversations about the weather are incredibly common in English-speaking environments because they provide an easy way to start casual small talk. Imagine you are a part of this conversation. Someone says, "Today feels much cooler than yesterday." You might respond by saying, "Yeah, I noticed that too. The temperature dropped quite a bit." Another natural response could be, "I actually love this cooler weather. It feels refreshing." These responses show how simple observations can create an engaging conversation. Now imagine the discussion continues. One person says, "Weather changes always affect my mood a little bit." The other person responds, "I totally get that. Sunny days always make me feel more energetic." The first speaker replies, "Exactly. There is just something about sunlight that boosts your mood." Conversations like this show how people connect daily experiences with personal feelings. Let us practice responding again. Imagine someone says, "Sunny days always boost my mood." You might agree by saying, "I feel the exact same way. Sunshine makes everything feel more positive." Another response could be, "That is so true. Bright weather can make the whole day feel lighter." Practicing responses like this improves your conversational fluency. Now, let us explore another scenario, discussing personal goals. Imagine someone says, "This year, I decided to focus more on personal growth." The listener responds with curiosity. "That sounds interesting. What kind of changes are you planning to make?" The speaker answers, "I want to read more books, learn new skills, and spend my time more wisely." Imagine you join the conversation. Someone says they want to focus on personal growth. You might respond by saying, "That is a really inspiring goal." Another response could be, "Improving yourself little by little can lead to massive changes over time. These responses encourage deeper conversation. Let us imagine the speaker continues. They say, "I realized that time passes so fast, so I want to use it more meaningfully." The listener responds thoughtfully. That is a very powerful realization. Conversations at advanced levels frequently include reflections like this, where people discuss life experiences and personal growth. Now, imagine someone says to you, "I want to use my time more meaningfully." Think about how you might respond. You could say, "That is a great mindset to have." Another response might be, "Making the most of your time can really improve your life." These responses help you express thoughtful ideas naturally. Now, let us explore a slightly different conversational style, sharing funny daily experiences. Imagine someone says, "You won't believe what happened during my commute this morning." The listener responds with interest. "What happened?" The speaker laughs and says, "I got on the wrong bus without even realizing it." The listener replies, "That must have been so confusing." Imagine you are listening to that story. A natural response might be, "I have totally done something similar before." Another response could be, "Well, at least it gave you a funny story to tell." These kinds of responses show empathy and humor. Now, imagine the conversation continues. The speaker says, "I didn't realize my mistake until the bus started heading in the opposite direction." The listener laughs and says, "That must have been quite a surprise." The speaker replies, "Yeah, but luckily I figured it out quickly." These exchanges show how storytelling works in natural English conversations. Let us practice responding again. Imagine someone says, "I accidentally got on the wrong bus." You might respond by saying, "Oh no, that sounds frustrating." Another response could be, "At least you noticed it before going too far." Practicing different reactions helps you become more flexible in a conversation. Now, let us focus on another key element of advanced English conversation: expressing agreement and understanding. Imagine someone says, "Sometimes life gets so busy that we forget to slow down." The listener responds thoughtfully, "That is so true." The speaker continues, "Taking small breaks can really improve your mental clarity." Imagine you respond to that idea. You might say, "I completely agree. Small breaks can help us recharge." Another response could be, "That is exactly why balance is so important in daily life." These responses demonstrate thoughtful dialogue. Let us practice another moment of reflection. Imagine someone says, "Life moves fast, and we should appreciate the small moments." Think about how you might respond. One answer could be, "That is a beautiful way to look at life." Another response could be, "Yeah, sometimes the simplest moments are the most meaningful." Now, imagine a final short conversation practice exercise for this section. One person says, "The more I practice English, the more comfortable I feel speaking it." The other person responds, "That is exactly how improvement works. Practice builds confidence." The first speaker adds, "And confidence makes conversations much easier." Now imagine someone says that to you. "The more I practice English, the more confident I become." You might respond by saying, "That is fantastic progress." Another response could be, consistency really pays off when learning a language. These types of encouraging conversations help sustain motivation. As you keep listening to and practicing interactions like these, your brain gradually becomes more comfortable processing fast English. You start identifying patterns, expressions, and natural rhythms that show up repeatedly in authentic conversations. Now, we will continue exploring more advanced conversational situations where people share experiences, express opinions, and react naturally to each other in everyday English. Let us continue developing your ability to understand fast English conversations by stepping into another natural daily life moment, a relaxed chat between two people who are reflecting on their day while walking outside in the evening. One person says, "You know, sometimes I feel like the day disappears before I even realize it." The other person nods and replies, "I know exactly what you mean. Some days feel incredibly short." This kind of observation happens all the time in natural English conversations because people frequently talk about how fast time passes during busy days. Now, imagine you are a part of that conversation. Someone says, "The day disappears before I even realize it." A natural response could be, "Yeah, time seems to speed up when you have a lot to do." Another good response might be, "I have noticed the exact same thing. When you are focused on work or learning, hours can pass without you even noticing." These responses keep the conversation flowing while also sharing your perspective. Let us imagine the conversation continues. The speaker says, "That is why I have been trying to slow down a little bit in the evenings." The listener asks, "So, what do you usually do to relax after a long day?" The speaker replies, "Sometimes I go for a walk. Sometimes I listen to music. And sometimes I just sit quietly and reflect on the day." These types of reflective conversations are very common among fluent speakers because they naturally lead to deeper discussion. Now, imagine someone asks you the exact same question. What do you usually do to relax after a long day? Think about how you might respond. You could say, "I usually spend some time practicing English or reading something interesting." Another response could be, "I love taking a short walk because it helps clear my head." Practicing answers like these prepares you for real-life interactions. Now, let us transition into another situation that happens constantly in fast English conversations, discussing work or daily responsibilities. Imagine, one person says, "Today was a little more challenging than I expected." The other person responds with interest, "Oh, really? What made it challenging?" The speaker explains, "There were several unexpected tasks that popped up during the day." Now, imagine you are part of that conversation. Someone tells you their day was challenging. You might respond by saying, "That happens sometimes. Unexpected tasks can mess up your whole schedule." Another natural response could be, "I totally understand that feeling. Some days get way busier than we planned." These responses show empathy and understanding. Let us continue the conversation. The speaker says, "But even though it was a crazy day, I learned a few good things." The listener replies, "That is a great way to look at it." The speaker continues, "Every challenge can teach us something valuable." Conversations like this show how fluent speakers frequently reflect positively on their experiences. Now imagine someone tells you, every challenge can teach us something. Think about your response. You might say, "That is a very healthy perspective." Another response could be, "Yeah, challenges usually help us grow." These responses sound thoughtful and natural. Now, let us explore another everyday topic, discussing personal motivation. Imagine someone says, "Lately, I have been trying to stay more motivated when learning new things." The listener responds, "That is important. Motivation can make a massive difference." The speaker continues, "I realized that making small, daily progress is better than waiting for perfect conditions." Imagine you are listening to that idea. You might respond by saying, "That is so true. Small steps can lead to massive results over time." Another response could be, "Consistency usually matters a lot more than speed." These responses reflect deeper thinking. Let us turn this moment into a speaking exercise. Imagine someone asks you, "How do you stay motivated when learning something new?" Think about your answer. You might say, "I try to remind myself that every small improvement brings me closer to my goal." Another great answer could be, "I try to practice regularly and focus on progress instead of perfection." These responses sound confident and thoughtful. Now, let us transition into another common situation, discussing daily routines. Imagine someone says, "My mornings used to feel really rushed, but lately I have been trying to organize them better." The listener replies, "That sounds like a positive change." The speaker explains, "I started preparing things the night before, so my mornings feel so much calmer." Now, imagine you are a part of that conversation. Someone says they want calmer mornings. You might respond by saying, "That is a really smart strategy." Another response could be, "Prepping in advance can make mornings so much easier." These types of responses show practical understanding. Let us imagine the conversation continues. The speaker says, "Now I feel less stressed when the day starts." The listener responds, "Starting the day calmly can totally change your whole mood." The speaker agrees and says, "Exactly. It helps me think a lot more clearly." Now imagine someone says to you, "Starting the day calmly improves your mood." You might respond by saying, "I completely agree." Another response could be, "That is exactly why morning routines are so important." These responses demonstrate thoughtful engagement. Now, let us explore another conversational pattern that shows up constantly in fast English, expressing curiosity about experiences. Imagine someone says, "Yesterday, I tried something completely new." The listener immediately asks, "What did you try?" The speaker replies, "I tried learning a few phrases in another language just for fun." Now, imagine you respond to that story. You might say, "That sounds really interesting." Another response could be, "Learning new languages can be incredibly fun." These responses show curiosity and encouragement. Let us continue the story. The speaker says, "It reminded me how exciting it feels to learn something new." The listener responds, "That is one of the best parts about learning." Conversations like this frequently transition from simple storytelling to deeper reflections about personal growth. Now, imagine someone says to you, "Learning something new always feels exciting." Think about your response. You might say, "Yeah, it definitely keeps life interesting." Another response could be, "It also helps expand your perspective." These responses sound thoughtful and natural. Now, let us explore another realistic conversation scenario, discussing technology and modern life. Imagine someone says, "Technology has changed the way we communicate so much." The listener responds, "That is definitely true." The speaker continues, "Sometimes it feels like the world moves way too fast because of it." Now imagine you are a part of that conversation. Someone says, "Technology has changed communication." You might respond by saying, "Yeah, communication has gotten so much faster and more convenient." Another response could be, "At the same time, it is important to maintain genuine human connection." These responses demonstrate balanced thinking. Let us imagine the conversation continues. The speaker says, "Even though technology is helpful, I still enjoy face-to-face conversations the most." The listener replies, "There is just something special about direct human interaction." These types of reflections show up all the time in thoughtful discussions. Now imagine someone tells you face-to-face conversations feel more meaningful. You might respond by saying, "I agree. They allow people to connect much more deeply." Another response could be, "Body language and tone make communication so much clearer." These responses add depth to the conversation. Now let us practice understanding a fast storytelling moment. Imagine someone speaking quickly and saying, "I planned to spend just 10 minutes checking my messages, but somehow I ended up scrolling through my phone for almost an hour." Even though the sentence moves quickly, the meaning is simple. The speaker intended to spend a short amount of time, but ended up spending way longer. Now imagine your response. You might say, "That happens to me way more often than I'd like to admit." Another response could be, "Time really does disappear when you are looking at your phone." These responses feel natural and relatable. Now, let us explore another reflective conversation. Imagine someone says, "The older I get, the more I appreciate small moments." The listener responds thoughtfully, "That is a really interesting perspective." The speaker continues, "Sometimes peace and simplicity are way more valuable than constant excitement." Imagine someone says that to you. Think about your response. You might say, "That is a very wise way to look at life." Another response could be, "Small moments usually bring the deepest happiness." These responses show deeper engagement with the topic. As you keep listening to and practicing conversations like these, your mind gradually becomes more comfortable with fast English. You start identifying expressions, reacting naturally, and expressing your own thoughts with much more confidence. Now, we will continue exploring more fast-paced conversations from everyday life, where people exchange opinions, tell short stories, and react naturally to each other. Let us continue building your ability to understand fast English conversations by visualizing another very natural moment in daily life. A casual chat that starts when two people are waiting somewhere together. One person says, "It feels like today has been one long, crazy day." The other person responds with a soft laugh and says, "Yeah, it definitely feels that way." The first speaker continues, "I had several things planned, but somehow the day got way busier than I expected. Situations like this are incredibly common in English conversations because people love to share quick updates about their day. Now imagine you are a part of that conversation. Someone says, "Today turned out way busier than I expected." A natural response could be, "That happens more often than we think." Another response could be, "Some days just seem to fill up with unexpected tasks." Both responses sound natural because they show understanding and empathy. Let us imagine the conversation continues. The speaker says, "At one point, I thought I would never finish everything I needed to do." The listener responds, "But somehow you managed to get through it." The speaker nods and says, "Yes, and now I finally feel a sense of relief." Conversations like this reflect the way people naturally talk about challenges and small victories during their day. Now imagine someone tells you, "I finally finished everything I needed to do today." Think about your response. You might say, "That must feel really satisfying." Another response could be, "It is always a great feeling when you check off all your tasks." Practicing responses like this helps you keep a fluid conversation going. Now let us transition into another everyday topic, discussing learning and improvement. Imagine someone says, "The more I practice English conversations, the more comfortable I feel speaking." The listener replies, "That is exactly how progress happens." The speaker continues, "At first, it felt really hard, but now it feels much more natural." This kind of reflection happens constantly when people talk about learning a new skill. Now imagine you are a part of that conversation. Someone says, "Practice makes speaking feel more natural." You might respond by saying, "Yeah, repetition helps the brain build confidence." Another response could be, "Consistent practice can make a huge difference." These responses show thoughtful agreement. Let us expand the conversation further. The speaker says, "I realize that listening carefully is just as important as speaking." The listener responds, "That is a great observation." The speaker continues, "When you listen more, you start noticing how native speakers actually express ideas." Conversations like this help learners understand the importance of listening skills. Now, imagine someone tells you, "Listening carefully improves speaking skills." Think about your response. You might say, "That is so true." Another response could be, "Understanding how people talk naturally is incredibly helpful." These responses sound thoughtful and natural. Now, let us explore another situation that happens constantly in daily dialogue, discussing future plans. Imagine someone says, "I have been thinking about trying something new this year." The listener responds with curiosity, "What kind of new things are you thinking about?" The speaker replies, "I am thinking about learning a completely new skill." Imagine you join this conversation. Someone says they want to learn something new. You might respond by saying, "That sounds super exciting." Another response could be, "Learning something new can be really rewarding." These responses keep the conversation flowing. Let us imagine the speaker continues. They say, "Trying new things keeps life interesting." The listener responds, "That is definitely true." The speaker continues, "Sometimes stepping outside your comfort zone leads to the best experiences." These types of conversations are common when people talk about personal growth. Now imagine someone says to you, "Stepping outside your comfort zone can lead to great experiences." Think about your response. You might say, "I totally agree." Another response could be, growth usually happens when we try something unfamiliar. Practicing responses like these helps you express thoughtful ideas. Now, let us explore another everyday conversation topic, discussing simple daily activities. Imagine someone says, I decided to take a short walk this morning before starting work. The listener replies, that sounds like a refreshing way to start the day. The speaker continues, it really helped me clear my head. Now, imagine you respond to that idea. You might say, walking can be so relaxing. Another response could be, fresh air always boosts my mood. These responses are simple but very natural. Let us imagine the conversation continues. The speaker says, sometimes the simplest habits make the biggest difference. The listener responds thoughtfully, that is very true. The speaker continues, small positive habits can gradually improve your whole life. These reflective statements frequently pop up in conversations between people discussing lifestyle improvements. Now imagine someone tells you, small habits can improve your life. Think about your response. You might say, that is a really powerful idea. Another response could be, consistency with small habits can create massive results. These responses demonstrate thoughtful engagement. Now, let us explore another conversational pattern, discussing unexpected events. Imagine someone says, earlier today, something funny happened to me. The listener responds with curiosity. What happened? The speaker laughs and says, I waved at someone because I thought they were my friend, but it turned out to be a total stranger. The listener laughs and replies, oh, that must have been a little awkward. Now imagine you are listening to that story. A natural response might be, that happens sometimes. Another response could be, I think everyone has experienced something like that. These responses show empathy and humor. Let us imagine the speaker continues. They say, luckily, the stranger laughed too. The listener responds, that is good. At least it turned into a funny moment. Conversations like this frequently turn small, embarrassing situations into humorous stories. Now, imagine someone tells you that story. Think about your response. You might say, at least it became a funny memory. Another response could be, moments like that make life a lot more interesting. These responses sound relaxed and natural. Now, let us transition into another conversational pattern, sharing personal reflections about time and life. Imagine someone says, the older I get, the more I realize how valuable time really is. The listener responds thoughtfully. That is a very meaningful realization. The speaker continues, it makes me want to spend my time more wisely. Imagine you respond to that idea. You might say, that is a really powerful perspective. Another response could be, time is one of the most valuable things we have. These responses show thoughtful engagement. Now, let us practice understanding fast-spoken storytelling. Imagine someone speaking quickly and saying, I went out to run a quick errand, and somehow I ended up having a long conversation with someone I ran into. Even though the sentence moves fast, the meaning is clear. The speaker planned a short activity, but ended up spending way longer chatting. Now, imagine how you might respond. You could say, that sounds like a nice surprise. Another response could be, the best conversations usually happen when we least expect them. These responses feel natural and conversational. Now, let us explore another reflective conversation. Imagine someone says, "Every conversation teaches us something if we truly listen." The listener responds thoughtfully. That is a very insightful idea. The speaker continues, "Listening carefully helps us understand people so much better." Conversations like this demonstrate deeper communication. Imagine someone says to you, "Listening helps us understand people better." Think about your response. You might say, "That is absolutely true." Another response could be, "Active listening is one of the most important communication skills." These responses express strong agreement. As you keep practicing these types of conversations, your brain becomes more comfortable with the speed and rhythm of natural English. The more you listen and respond to authentic conversational patterns, the easier it becomes to understand fast speech and express your own ideas clearly. Now, we will continue exploring more advanced conversations that include storytelling, opinions, reflections, and spontaneous reactions that frequently happen in real-life English interactions. Let us start with another very natural moment in daily conversation, a situation where people start talking about how their day unfolded. Imagine someone saying, "You know, today made me realize how quickly things can change." The other person responds with curiosity and says, "What do you mean?" The speaker continues calmly, "This morning, I thought the whole day would be stressful, but by the evening, everything felt completely different." Conversations like this usually start with small reflections that lead to deeper ideas. Now, imagine you are listening to that story. A natural response might be, "That happens more often than we expect." Another response could be, "Sometimes the day surprises us in unexpected ways." These types of responses show understanding while keeping the conversation flowing naturally. Let us imagine the conversation continues. The speaker says, "It reminded me that we shouldn't judge the whole day based on one moment." The listener responds thoughtfully, "That is actually a really wise way to think about it." The speaker adds, "Yeah, sometimes patience allows things to get better." Conversations like this are common when people reflect on their experiences. Now imagine someone tells you, "Patience allows situations to get better." Think about your response. You might say, "I completely agree." Another response could be, "Patience usually brings better results." These responses sound thoughtful and natural. Now let us transition into another everyday discussion, talking about the importance of learning and curiosity. Imagine someone saying, "One thing I have learned recently is that curiosity keeps the mind active." The listener responds with interest. "That is an interesting thought." The speaker continues, "When we stay curious, we keep discovering new things about the world." Now, imagine you are a part of that conversation. Someone says, "Curiosity keeps the mind active." You might respond by saying, "That is so true." Another response could be, "Curiosity often leads to new opportunities." These responses show thoughtful agreement. Let us imagine the conversation continues. The speaker says, "The minute we stop asking questions, we stop learning." The listener replies thoughtfully, "That is a really powerful statement." Conversations like this frequently happen when people discuss personal growth and knowledge. Now imagine someone says to you, Asking questions keeps learning alive. Think about your response. You might say, "That is a great perspective." Another response could be, "Questions are the beginning of understanding." These responses demonstrate deeper engagement. Now, let us explore another conversation that happens constantly in daily life, discussing daily observations. Imagine someone saying, "I have noticed that people often underestimate how powerful simple conversations can be." The listener responds with curiosity. "What do you mean by that?" The speaker explains, "Sometimes a short conversation can completely change your mood or even your perspective." Now, imagine you respond to that idea. You might say, "That is definitely true." Another response could be, "Conversations can really impact the way we think." These responses sound natural and thoughtful. Let us imagine the conversation continues. The speaker says, "Even a short exchange of ideas can inspire someone." The listener replies, "That is one of the beautiful things about communication." Conversations like this show how people frequently reflect on the importance of human connection. Now, imagine someone tells you, "Short conversations can inspire people." Think about your response. You might say, "That is a wonderful thought." Another response could be, "Communication can have a really powerful impact." These responses keep the conversation thoughtful. Now, let us explore another realistic daily life conversation, discussing personal habits. Imagine someone saying, "Recently, I have been trying to become more mindful of how I spend my time." The listener responds with interest. "That sounds like a positive goal." The speaker continues, "I realize that small changes in daily habits can make a massive difference." Now, imagine you are a part of that dialogue. Someone says they want to be more mindful with their time. You might respond by saying, "That is a really valuable habit." Another response could be, "Being mindful can improve so many areas of life." These responses sound reflective. Let us imagine the speaker continues. They say, "When you pay attention to how you spend your time, you start making better decisions." The listener replies thoughtfully, "That is so true." Conversations like this frequently happen when people discuss personal improvement. Now, imagine someone says to you, "Paying attention to your time helps you make better decisions." Think about your response. You might say, "That is a great insight." Another response could be, "Awareness usually leads to better choices." These responses express thoughtful agreement. Now, let us explore another conversational pattern, sharing a quick story about daily life. Imagine someone saying, "Earlier today, I started talking with someone I had never met before." The listener responds with curiosity. "How did that happen?" The speaker replies, "We were both waiting in line, and the conversation just started naturally." Now, imagine you are listening to that story. A natural response might be, "That is so interesting." Another response could be, "Sometimes the best conversations start unexpectedly." These responses show curiosity and engagement. Let us imagine the conversation continues. The speaker says, "We ended up talking about books, travel, and learning new skills." The listener replies, "That sounds like a really meaningful conversation." Conversations like this show how people connect through shared interests. Now, imagine someone tells you that story. Think about your response. You might say, "That must have been a really fun discussion." Another response could be, "Conversations like that can be super inspiring." These responses sound natural. Now, let us practice understanding a fast spoken moment. Imagine someone speaking quickly and saying, "I thought I would just spend a few minutes organizing my notes, but before I knew it, an entire hour had passed." Even though the sentence moves fast, the meaning is clear. The speaker intended to spend a short amount of time, but became deeply focused on the task. Now, imagine your response. You might say, "That happens when you get completely focused." Another response could be, "Time passes fast when you are engaged in something interesting." These responses feel incredibly natural now. Let us explore another reflective conversation. Imagine someone saying, "Life frequently teaches us lessons through everyday experiences." The listener responds thoughtfully, "That is so true." The speaker continues, "Sometimes the most important lessons show up in the smallest moments." Imagine someone says that to you. Think about your response. You might say, "That is a beautiful thought." Another response could be, "Small moments usually carry profound meaning." These responses sound deeply thoughtful. Now, let us imagine one final conversation as we approach the end of this lesson. Someone says, "The more I practice English conversations, the easier it becomes to express my thoughts." The listener responds encouragingly, "That is fantastic progress." The speaker continues, "Confidence really grows when we practice regularly." Now, imagine someone says to you, "Confidence grows through practice." Think about your response. You might say, "That is absolutely true." Another response could be, "Practice turns effort into skill." These responses show agreement and encouragement. As you keep practicing conversations like these, your listening skills become stronger and your speaking ability becomes more natural. You start identifying the rhythm of fast English conversations, understand expressions quickly, and respond with confidence. With consistent practice and attention to natural conversational patterns, you can gradually transition toward a level of English comprehension where fast conversations feel comfortable and engaging. Over time, your ability to understand and participate in English discussions will continue to evolve. Let us start with one more natural situation that frequently happens in everyday life. A moment when people start reflecting on the small lessons they have learned during the day. Imagine someone saying, "You know, today reminded me how important it is to stay patient when things don't go exactly as planned." The other person listens carefully and responds, "What happened?" The speaker continues calmly. "A few problems popped up during the day, but instead of reacting immediately, I decided to stay calm and think about the situation first." Conversations like this frequently happen when people talk about personal experiences and the lessons they learned from them. Now, imagine you are a part of that conversation. Someone tells you that staying patient helped them handle a hard situation. A natural response might be, "That sounds like a really wise approach." Another response could be, "Patience usually helps us see solutions more clearly." These responses sound thoughtful and supportive. Let us imagine the conversation continues. The speaker says, "In the past, I might have reacted quickly, but now I try to pause and think before responding." The listener replies thoughtfully, "That kind of self-awareness is super valuable."